Hi, team. Welcome to 10 Talks, another day of conversations about how women win. And we are figuring it out our way. We don't have the answers, but we love hearing from you. If you'd like to find out more information, go to howwomenwin.com. Kathy and I are on this journey. We've got a great guest today who's going to really share a part of her journey as well as winning strategies. So, Kathy, you want to introduce our guest?
Absolutely. So I haven't actually been in contact with Liz since I was watching her play volleyball at the University of Kentucky, where she had a great career, but then left there and started her own consulting firm, has just celebrated the 9th anniversary of Comby Consulting. And let me toss it back to you, Carlette, and we can kind of get Liz's story and then get started.
So Liz, what's so important for us is we want to really hear your story so that other women can get hope and be motivated and really start to piece together their winning strategies on how they win. So what's important to us is really personal from a perspective of your story. How did you really start where you are and get to where you are, and what has worked and not worked?
Yeah, no, well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. It's an honor to be here. Being a former college athlete, I love to always give back, and whatever I can do for the women, especially women athletes, I am all for that. But my story actually is probably not as unique as probably just like most of you. I started off in college athletics. Did not think I was going to be a volleyball player, actually. I played soccer my entire career. And then junior year of high school, I quit soccer and I saw the Olympics my freshman year of high school. And I saw volleyball and I was like, you know what? I think I want to play volleyball now. And so I actually started playing volleyball when I was a freshman in high school. So I wasn't one of those who started really young. And I was like, you know what? I think this is going to be my sport. And so I quit soccer, played volleyball, got a Division I scholarship to the University of Kentucky. And really, I loved everything about my college experience, and not just the athletic part of it, but more so the leadership aspect of it. And I think so much of what I am today has to do with the fact of what I did at the University of Kentucky. And, I'm fortunate now to be a business owner. I'm an entrepreneur and run my own business, but that didn't happen by chance. That was all very much set up for me throughout my whole college career. And so I would say athletics had such a pivotal part of what I do and how I do things. Even today as an entrepreneur, I look back and I'm like, gosh, like if I would not have been at the University of Kentucky with all the support that I had, I would not be where I am today at all. So I'm very, very fortunate for just everybody who's been in my path. In particular, the NCAA, the Big Ten. I worked for the Big Ten after I worked at Kentucky. I worked at Stanford. I worked in college athletics for a really long time and decided, oh gosh, like, can I leave sports? Can I really do this? And I did. I left sports, but I still have so much like hope for all the athletes who are in sports now and continuing throughout their career. So I'm just very, very fortunate.
So Liz, I want to start with the very beginning where you switched from soccer to volleyball, because that's you really owning something that mattered to you. And I think a lot of times we think once we've started something, we can't switch or quit or change. And so where did you find that in you, or how did you do that?
Yeah, really good question, especially for our youth athletes right now. So many people specialize so early on and put so much time, energy, and effort into that. For me, my parents were very much of the sorts of do whatever you want to do, but what you're going to do, you're going to commit to, and you're going to finish. So I couldn't quit soccer halfway through the season. I had to finish my season out and then I could switch sports. But for me, it was very much of like, you know what? I don't have the pressure on me from my family. It was more about me of what is it that I like to do and what do I think I can be successful at? And I think that really gave me the opportunity to make a choice for myself without my parents, without influences, without coaches. I didn't have anyone saying, you have to do this, Liz. Because as a freshman, I was asked to be on varsity for soccer. And so I was talented and the coaches identified that, but there was no pressure. It really wasn't any pressure. And there was no backlash if I didn't do it. And I had a lot of very supportive people in my volleyball career who, once I decided my freshman year, I want to play volleyball, that my parents got me to the best club. I grew up in Chicago. I played for Sky High. I They gave me all the resources that I need. And I was very fortunate, because I know a lot of kids are not fortunate to have that type of support, but they're like, okay, we just spent thousands of dollars on soccer. Here we go. Let's go to volleyball now. And so for me, it was very much being able to have my own choice, have the support of adults around me, and the financial means to make that happen.
So we talk a lot about intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation, and you've talked about them without using exactly that wrapping on them, but that's what you're talking about. Is this extrinsic? Obviously, is your parents saying, hey, we've invested all this in soccer. No, you're not switching. Or, well, okay, if you're going to volleyball, you got to get a scholarship, and you didn't have any of that. Where did the motivation come from?
It's a really good question. I think for me, and I know people talk about either you're born this way or you're not. I think for me, it's just about, I was an achiever. I was a perfectionist. And I shouldn't say was, I should say is. But I learned early on that something that I'm good at, if I work hard at it and continue to work hard at it, I will be rewarded. Now, I will caveat that saying, so I have dyslexia. And so for me, things don't come easy. And when I say things, I'm not just talking about academics. So I've always been a person where I've had to find a different way to get to the end versus just like going from A to B. And so I think internally, I knew like hard work never scared me. That was never the issue. It was very much of like, is it worth my time? Meaning I can do, if you were to ask me, Liz, go, sell ice to Eskimos. I'd have no idea how to do it, but guess what? I'd figure it out. I don't care. I'd figure it out. But is it important to me? Is it something that's going to impact others? How is it going to impact me? And so for me, that's more of my decision making, is more around how do I come up? Am I able to be my authentic self? Am I able to do what I want to do, not because somebody else wants me to do it? And is it something that's going to add value to the world?
So okay, if you're born this way, then there's no reason for us to explore how women win, because it's like, well, I don't know, have the right babies. That's how you win. So were there places where you got clues, where you were helped, where you had to learn? We're looking for what are women doing? What did you do as an achiever? How did you become one?
So I think that some people are born this way. And I don't think the answer is, sorry, you just weren't born that way.
Yeah, wrong baby.
Yeah, wrong baby.
Yeah.
I do think a lot of it has to do with people supporting you, as in mentors. For me, I had a lot of positive reinforcement my entire career. So when I'm saying career, I'm talking about athletic as well as professional career. I had a lot of people encouraging me. And when I say encouraging, I'm not referring just to the positive. Encouraging me of like, you really need to work harder at this, or you really need to put more time into this. And so having that true dialogue of people who you trust, I think has really made me who I am. The other part is people identifying in me. So for example, for me, academics was never something where I'm like, oh, I am so smart. Like that was something that I train now neurosurgeons. I train the smartest people in the world, but I would have never thought that was me until I had other people telling me like, Liz, you are so smart. And I'm like, what do you mean? No, I'm not. Like I'm dyslexic. And so I think having that reinforcement and having that external validation, although that we want to have that internally, I think that really does help of having people who are like, I see something in you that you don't see, and I'm going to tell you what that is. And I'm also going to give you opportunity to explore that with making mistakes. And that's something, I know, Kathy, you and I both know Mitch Barnhart. He is someone who, in the very beginning of my athletic career, has always been supportive of me from an academic standpoint, as well as from a leadership standpoint. And so for me, having high-level executives and people looking at me and being like, I trust you, you can do that. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I think you're right. And so having that along the way has really been helpful for me.
So Liz, as we think about really the relationships being a key component to how women win, when we get in relationships that are constantly telling us what we can't do or the limitations, we believe it, right? So when I listen to you and think about, okay, how do women win? It's about who we surround ourselves with. And are those people telling us the truth and also for us in a way that's really pushing us to be who we want to be rather than holding us back or wanting us to be who they need us to be. So how would you recommend people finding the right people? I love what you said about that they pushed you, and also they saw in you something that maybe you didn't see. That's such a valuable, just new element, that it means somebody's looking out for me.
Yeah, I think it's, there's a lot of people that want to help others.
Mm.
Unfortunately, there's also people who have ulterior motives.
Yeah.
In helping others. And so it's really hard to differentiate of like, why are people really trying to help you? Or like, what is it they're trying to do, especially with athletes? And now with all of this, athletes can be paid and, it's a whole new world. And so you really have to identify like, what are the motives of the individuals, and not doing based on when they're talking to you, but how are they interacting with others? How are they helping others? What are they doing when you just see them walking in the office or you see them walking on the court? Like, how are those people? And so really being observant and not just taking things of like, oh, they have a vested interest in me, because I did have people who had a vested interest in me, but they also had a motive of they needed something for them. And so those are the people you have to be careful of. And so although we have a strong community of women who support each other, there's also another community that's really trying to step up and get to where they want to be as well. So I would say overall, just being observant of how they're interacting when they're not interacting with you.
Okay. And when they are pushing you and it doesn't feel good, and you're really struggling to own kind of your authentic self, being like, well, authentically, I want to do it this way, but somebody is somewhat coaching me up or telling me I need to be different. How do you work through that struggle?
That's challenging. It really is challenging, especially if it's somebody that you really respect and they're giving you feedback that you're really not in agreement with. And I think that's where you have to take a step back and think about ultimately what are your goals and where are you trying to go, and being able to kind of have those real conversations with individuals who might be pushing you down a different direction. But that takes courage and that takes time. So it's not like this one-time conversation. It's something that requires you to have this honest dialogue on a regular basis so that you guys can both be on the same page and be able to continue down that mentoring path or that coaching path or whatever that path is that you're searching for.
So Liz, you're in the cocoon, all right? So you're a soccer player, then volleyball player, Division I athlete, lots of support, working in the Big Ten sports and everything else. Tell us a story of making the decision to go out on your own and to start your own business.
It was scary. It was very scary. And my whole identity was wrapped up in sports. I only thought I'm just an athlete. And then once I was done being a competing athlete, I was just an administrator. And I'm not saying just as in like downplaying what that is, but that's all I knew. And so it was very hard for me to leave because I felt like that was my calling to help student athletes. And so what I ended up doing is, so I finished my MBA. For me, kind of going out on my own, it was very much, I wanted to be intellectually challenged and I wanted to be able to help others. And I wanted to also have a family. Working in healthcare and what I do, so I train surgeons and sales reps. Majority of the sales reps that I train are what? Do you guys know?
Women. Females.
No.
No?
Actually not female. They're all former athletes. So a majority of people who are in med device training majority are former athletes. And so for me, I still felt like I could have that connection and still be a part of a team and still be a part of contributing to the bigger mission. And so it was hard for me to go from being an athlete, being an administrator, and then going to a company. So before I went out on my own, I went to a company. I was in-house at a couple companies. And my job got eliminated at one of the companies. So I was let go. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was like, I have 2 kids under the age of 5. My husband works in the NFL. He's on a contract, so he could be let go at any point. And now I don't have a job. And I'm like, what do I do? And so I was very, very fortunate where the CEO that I was working with at the time, he sent my name out to a bunch of individuals in the Bay Area and said, here's a girl. She can help you. If you need training help, she's available. A week later, I had my next job. I said, I will consult for you. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll find the next really cool startup, but right now let me just consult for you and we can decide what to do in 6 months. I was tired. I was exhausted. I had so much going on from a work perspective at my old company. I just needed a break. So my plan was, okay, let me just get my bearings underneath me. Let me consult and find a next really cool startup. And then 9 years later, here I am. It all worked out.
You are
very
the
nice.
really cool startup.
Yeah, you became the cool
exactly. And but I will tell you, that was one of the pivotal moments for me, being an athlete and being able to always achieve, and then having no control and being let go from a job, and then having to recreate yourself was super challenging. But knowing I also was an athlete, I was able to take that tenacity and everything that I've learned of like, okay, you're just going to do it. You're going to practice. You're going to go in every day and you're going to make it happen. And that's really what happened for me, is I was able to put together a business where I found a niche. I found an area that I knew I was good at. And actually, I should probably caveat, I didn't know I was good at. I knew probably year 3 or 4 into my business. I'm like, oh, I am pretty good at this. And really just capitalize on that and continue to help others throughout doing what I've been doing. So I've been very, very fortunate with that.
How does the mother piece play in?
It is a very challenging piece to incorporate, especially when you're first starting your business. So when I worked at a startup, I was working probably 60 hours a week. I was traveling every other week. My husband also travels. Was in the NFL, and he was gone 9 months out of the year. We have no family here. I live in the Bay Area and it's very expensive. And so for me, I was very, very regimented. I had like, my kids had to go to bed at this time. They had to eat at this time. I had to work at this time. Like, it was very drill sergeant-esque. And that's how I made it in the beginning. Now, 9 years later, I have the luxury of, I have a team that works for me. I don't work 80 hours a week, 60 hours a week anymore. I am fully present with my children. I drop them off at school. I pick them up. I go to their games. I don't travel, but it's been very, very intentional. Being a working mom is very, very possible. And I recommend it to anybody who has that need, feels like they need to do it. But you have to have boundaries, and you have to be able to be super efficient in what you're doing and know like what is worth your time and what is not.
And what about, like, I'm just thinking of all the women that I work with in corporate America, and they're being tugged in lots of different directions, and maybe they don't want to do what the boss wants them to do, or it's not in alignment. And so, trying to have that boundary of saying, well, I don't want to do that, but yet it's what your boss is asking you to do. How do you manage that in a way that really stays authentic to you?
Yeah. So I think it is really important that you listen to yourself, but I also think that there are times that you're going to have to sacrifice, and not, if it doesn't go against your morals and your values, you're going to have to sacrifice. I know there's a lot of people that believe that there's something called work-life balance. I don't believe there's such a thing. I think there's work-life flexibility. I do believe that and I've experienced this myself, you have to put the time in, no matter what it is. There's going to be times when you're working 60 hours a week. I've never met a successful person. And when I say successful, I'm referring to somebody who is made it to the top level of their career, who hasn't had to sacrifice something for an extended period of time in order to get to where they want to be. I think it's a fallacy to think that you're going to be able to just do the like, okay, I'm going to do my 8 to 5, or I'm going to do my practice, my 3 hours a day practice, and that's all I'm going to do in order to be elite. And if somebody can do that, tell me how you've done it. I would love to hear it. And maybe the next generation will be better at it than we are. But I'm a millennial and I have not seen that. And I really, really think that you have to be able to put your mind into, if it's ethically okay and it aligns with your values, and you might not want to do it, and it might not be where you need to be, and it's like, that's so beneath me, you have to suck it up. You have to do it because you have to pay your dues in order to get to where you want to be. Just my thought. And I'm sure there's people who could argue that.
When you say you have to, so give us some examples of places where you made these kinds of choices.
Yeah. So for me, it was very much with the travel piece and being gone. So I made a conscious decision. Before my kids were 5 years old, my whole thinking was, okay, my kids are not going to remember anything before the age of 5. So I'm going to travel for work, not for fun. I'm going to work late nights. I am going to make sure that I am up early. I am going to work out. I'm going to eat well, and I'm going to work really, really hard. And so my entire first 5 years of my kids' lives were very much work out, work the body. And that's about it. So like the whole thing that I sacrificed was more of like the fun, the play. I would play with them, but it wouldn't be, I wasn't taking girls' trips. I wasn't doing all of that stuff that I should have been doing, but I knew at that point in my life, I just couldn't. So for those first 5 years, I didn't. Once my kids were a little bit older, I then started to incorporate more of the fun. Now, I should caveat that I'm an Enneagram 3, if you guys know what that is. I am a black or white thinking. So like gray is very difficult for me. I'm all or nothing. And so that for me was my methodology. Now, looking back, do I think I could have done it differently? Probably. I probably could have incorporated a little bit of fun, but I just didn't know at the time how to do it. And so the sacrifice for me was very much, it wasn't sacrificing my health. It wasn't sacrificing my children. It wasn't sacrificing my husband. It was sacrificing the extracurricular. And I'm okay with it. I really am okay with it. Where I sit today, I financially have the means to do things I would have never been able to do if I did not put that time, energy, and effort into it. And I think that's something that I hope women or whoever's listening, you guys can take that away, is that you have to put the time and you have to sacrifice something at some point in order to get to where you want to be. I know it's not a good story. I know that's not like what anybody wants to hear.
Maybe it's not the story that we want to hear. I mean, it's the whole, I want to be a great athlete. I mean, you know, the cliche that I heard from football coaches was, yeah, he wants to go to heaven, but he doesn't want to die.
Yes.
You know, and so, yes, I mean, all of us see this well, at least the three of us, you and Carlette are cut from a lot of the same cloths, own business, parents, black and white structure. I live gray. You know, it's my world and my universe, and so I'll provide the counterweight to it. But yes, of you know, I mean, I think this is what we're discovering, wouldn't you say, Carlette? With this and these principles, is we haven't found anybody yet who's successful who goes, yeah, no, it was pretty simple.
Well,
you know,
Kathy,
I just kind of show up now and then, and boy, it just fell in my lap.
Well, Kathy, number one, we know how women win is defining winning for ourselves, because that's what's so important. And I know, you know, Liz, you've articulated that beautifully, is really figuring out exactly what you want and being willing to go for it. What I'm really just listening to and processing is thinking of all of my clients and watching how they do want it all, and they want it all their way. And there really isn't that flexibility or that adaptability or that growth model. I mean, they think they're growing as long as it feels comfortable and it doesn't make them have anxiety or stress, you know, and not in a negative way. It's just that there's so much information in the world coming at them that they're taking in all that information, and it really isn't in alignment with what we're saying for peak performance requires.
I do think you mentioned, you know, does it cause anxiety? Does it cause you discomfort? And I think there's a tolerance for that, but you have to also listen to that too. Like if there's a point where you're like, okay, I'm feeling this all the time, then that's something where you're like, okay, I need to make some changes, but you're going to feel discomfort. You're going to feel like, I'm not qualified to do this. I'm not ready to do this. I don't want to do this. Mm-hmm. And there's days, even now, I sit there and I talk to my team and I'm like, I don't want this. This isn't what I want anymore. And they're like, okay, go to sleep. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And
well, Liz, I do want to talk through that, because that's what I think, what Kathy and I are discovering on How Women Win is be authentic. Okay, well, who is my authentic self? Because when I'm being pushed or I'm being challenged, I feel like I'm not authentic. So really being able to understand when we're growing versus when we might be pushing ourselves in a way that isn't healthy. And I think you only find that out by going through it and really being able to get to the other side and be like, wow, that was worth it. And so when you talk about those sacrifices, I do think it's important that we own our sacrifices. And I also want to ask you about just owning your ambition. because a lot of times that authentic alignment comes from not thinking I should be this ambitious, or I should be home with my children, or all the shoulds that show up. So how did you own your ambition?
So I feel very fortunate where I have not had any issue of like being a working mom or having any guilt with that. I always feel like everything that I've done with intention with my family, meaning that I knew intentionally I wasn't going to be home. I knew that I was going to surround my children and my husband with loving people that I knew could support them while I was absent. When I say absent, I mean gone for like the weekend or something. So I didn't have to really deal with a lot of that mom guilt or working guilt because I made a conscious choice in the beginning. I want to go back, and I'll come back to this in a minute. I want to go back to what you said about the sacrifice. There was an experience that I experienced about a year ago where I was with a client, and it was one of the hardest things I had to deal with, where I wasn't able to be my authentic self. And what happened was there was a group of individuals that I was working with who were under a lot of stress. And it was also during COVID. So that impacted their ability to communicate, all of us to communicate and interact. And they wanted me to show up a certain way. And I felt it, and I'm like, okay. And it was a big contract, and it was a lot of money, and there was a lot of pressure riding on this. And like, they wanted me to be this way. And I'm like, okay, like they keep telling me this is what they want. And they're telling me they're not happy with this and they're not happy. And I'm like, okay, how do I do this to still be me? And I kind of put me aside for a minute, and I bought into, okay, let me just do it their way. Let me do it so that they feel comfortable. Let me make this how they need it to be. And I will tell you, I was miserable. I was sick to my stomach all the time. I had tension headaches. And we talk about that growing period or that anxiety. And like, I wasn't able to identify it. I was like, what is going on? Something's not right. And I'm like, it's okay. Just keep pressing, keep going. You're going to be okay. You can push through this. You can do anything. Like my motto is can't stop, won't stop. Can't stop, won't stop. Not a good motto, by the way. And so I had this encounter where this went on for 3 or 4 months. And then I was like, I hit my point. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I cannot take on being this person they want me to be and meeting this standard that they want. And it wasn't an unreasonable ask. So it wasn't something that conflicted with my values. It's just not who I was. So I had to show up every day with this different mask on. And I did it for 4 months. And then finally I was like, I went and talked to the person who did my contract. I'm like, I can't do this. I'm done. And it was a non-negotiable. I said, I will finish this out. I will finish the project. Here's what I will do. Here's what I won't do. And I will turn everything over to you, and we will leave this agreement. And they wanted to negotiate. Oh, you're so valuable. Oh, what can we do to change? I said, this is not a discussion. This isn't like, I don't want to like figure out a better way. How do we see things eye to eye? It was just, I had to make that choice for me. And it was so challenging because we were talking about thousands of dollars I was leaving on the table. And I was just like, I can't. And so that to me was something that I tried to sacrifice, like what I needed as an individual. And I walked away from that experience thinking like, man, I'm a failure. Like I couldn't do it. I lost all that money. They don't like me. They didn't think I'm good. All that inner dialogue that we go through. And then now here I sit, a year later, and I'm like, praise the Lord, I went through that. I have the best experience now with my clients. I know how to set things up appropriately. I know how to be me. I know how to show them who I'm going to be before they sign that contract so that we have the same agreement. And so I've learned through that really tough time that although I lost thousands of dollars, I gained so much more. I now work, I don't know if I want to say this publicly, but I work like 9 to 2. Yeah. I am able to take a couple days off in the summer. I'm able to go on vacations. I'm able to trust my teammates. I'm able to set things up where now it benefits me because I went through that really, really hard situation. And so going back to the sacrifices, I gave up me. I gave up, coming and showing up as me, but then I came back to myself. Yeah. And I was like, oh, here I am.
Yeah. Here I missed you, right? I missed you.
Yeah.
I
And
think we've all done that.
yes. Yeah. And so it was really nice to kind of go through that experience, even though at the time I'm like, I had tension headaches for like 5 months. And I was like, who has tension headaches for 5 months? Like I thought I'm like, there's something wrong with my back. I'm like, no, nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. So going back to owning my ambition, I think it has to do with very much of knowing who you are, what you want, being flexible, like you mentioned, and allowing yourself to make mistakes, but not be brought down by your mistakes. And I know that's cliche. I know a lot of people say like, you learn from your mistakes. And I'm like, yeah, you do. Until once you go through them, you do learn from them.
Yeah, on the back side of them, you can look back and go, okay, that sucked, but I guess it was good for me.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is like, I've learned that I am valuable for who I am, not what I do.
And how did you come? And was this experience something that taught you that? Because you stayed in that situation because of what you did, even though it wasn't you?
Yes, because what I learned is that it wasn't personal. And it wasn't that because they didn't like me. It wasn't that my work wasn't good enough. It wasn't like, and that to me, like being an athlete, a former athlete, like you always think your performance is your end game. That's what makes you good. But it wasn't. It was they were dealing with things internally. They had things going on that I had no clue about. They had people getting fired and people getting hired. And it was just so many things. And so for me, learning that I was valuable for who I am, that nobody can take that away. Nobody can do that. Nobody can say like that you're not valuable, because I know, like just showing up, we all are valuable. And that's how we were all created, to be valuable. Not because we, scored so many points, and we are not defined by the external. And that's very, very hard for an athlete. At least for me, it was very hard for me because I was always validated by my external, by what I could do and how I could perform and what I could contribute.
We're talking emotional currency here. Kathy, you're going to tee us up. I'm just waiting for you to chime in on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, so it's the whole issue of where, we talked quite a bit about discomfort and uncomfortableness being learning opportunities, but then knowing where is it enough. And so, So as I said to you, when you asked about, well, what is emotional currency about? Well, it's about, I think, again, it's how women connect with each other by saying, all right, here's who I am, and this is where I failed. And it's painting with a broad brush, stereotype alert stuff, but guys don't have a lot of those kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
Now, maybe they intuit it about each other, or they give each other clues different ways, but it's not by saying, boy, here's where I screwed up. Yeah, so thank you for sharing the story. I mean, I think the art in it is, where do you push through uncomfortable things where you maybe aren't totally who you are in this situation because you need to get this contract, and you get it, and you are who you are, and you succeed. And where do you have 5 months of tension headaches?
And I think for me, now that I've been able to identify that, I think I'll be able to notice it faster. And so I think it goes back to, you have to go through that uncomfortable, but you have to listen to yourself too.
So emotional currency is how women connect with each other. Is
how we share, how we exchange that currency.
How we share, how we share who we are. And it's usually in a manner of a shortcoming or a vulnerability, something we're not very good at. And if I give you a clue, it's like, oh boy, I'm not very good at this, and you go, well, I'm great at it. Or you go, oh, you're not any good at that. Well, you ought to hear what I'm not any good at. I mean, it can become a competition, which isn't, now we don't build connection. But a lot of times it is the heartbeat of connection between us, because we're opening our hearts
Well, and Kathy, what I want to just unpack and explore, and Liz, you're just great for doing this with us, is this is something we're not very good at, and we're trying to play a lot of different roles. And so that's where we came together on this book, is like, how do women win our way? Number one, we define winning, whatever, we're all personal about that. And then our way means that I am in a safe place. I am around the people that support me, so that this emotional currency can really have a great exchange and investment that grows, rather than getting hurt constantly by other women who are not necessarily for me, or something's happening, they're climbing or whatever it is that's happening. So Liz, on your journey to success and to winning as a woman, how have you learned to invest and share that emotional currency?
So I think for me, it's always been, you have to be authentic yourself, and you have to be willing to show your mistakes, your failures, your inadequacies. And if you're able to do that, people will then model what you're doing. And so I always come into relationships very much as like, I'm not perfect. I don't want to be perfect. And here's where I've made mistakes. And here's what I've learned. And what have you done? And
Right.
So I think it's more of having that connection. And then also, I think it's coming from a mindset of abundance versus scarcity. And I think that took me a while to kind of get to, especially when you run your own business, you kind of feel like, oh gosh, like, is there enough? And I've really taken a different approach over the past, I would say 7 years. Anybody who ever contacts me about, Liz, how do I succeed in training? How do I do what you're doing? I will always help them, always, because for me, it's not about me getting better. It's about all of us getting better. And that's my team mentality that I always bring with us. Like, I will share my company secrets. I will share, how I can do things and mistakes that I've made, because why should you have to make those mistakes? I'll share it with you. And you share with me what you've done, and let's collaborate and figure out how we can do this together. But I don't think that's the common language of most people, especially people who haven't achieved their success yet. I think it's harder for the people who are kind of still climbing to have that mentality, because they're like, well, you already have it. You're already there. Like, it's not as challenging for you, but that's how I got there.
Right.
That's really how I got there, is by having supportive, authentic relationships where I'm not going to be fake. I'm not going to sit here and tell you things just because I want you to like me, or I want you to give me a job, or I want you to have me on your team. I'm going to tell you something because it's kind of what's on my heart right now. So what's on your heart right now?
Yeah. Well said. Well, Liz, this has been great. We're very grateful for you and your journey. What are your words of wisdom to women as they set out to really discover how to win their way?
So I think the first thing would be, know your why and stick to your why. Remember that you're valuable for who you are and not what you do. You're going to have to sacrifice, but you will gain. So be okay with the uncomfortable. Be okay with the sacrifice. So surround yourself with people who will be real with you in the good times and the bad times, who will give you honest feedback, not just to fluff you up. You don't want those people. You don't want the people who always have good things to say. Like, that's nice to have, but that's not what you need right now. We're really not in control. None of us are in control. And so although if you're striving for perfection, that's not real. If you haven't read the book by Carol Dweck called Mindset, that's something I would encourage everybody to read. Have that growth mindset with everything that you're doing. Always be willing to learn and grow. You're never, once you're at the top, whatever that top is, you're really not done growing. You're still there. And relationships are really just the core of what we need in our lives. And just be authentic. Be authentic. If I could tell you anything, like, you are perfect just the way you are. Don't try and be anyone different.
Yeah, I love that. I love just owning you and getting better at it every day, whoever you are, whatever you're feeling. Yes, yes, yes. And, let's figure out how to get you being your authentic self and really owning it and winning your way. So Kathy, thank you for another great conversation. Liz, excited to support you and be on this journey for just adding another great woman to our team, to be on everyone else's support team. So team, it's up to you. Go out and win your way. And thank you for being on our journey for how women win.